Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Manila House and Henley Partners, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar on activating Plan B, which is about finding out whether a second passport or a second residence is right for you. I know this has been a most nerve-wracking day for a lot of us while we await the results of the US elections. And so we thank you for joining us today. And I'll turn you over in a minute to Scott Moore, who is the director, and he heads the Philippine business for Henley Partners. He's based between Manila and Singapore. Scott is a senior professional in the investment migration industry with experience advising hundreds of high net worth individuals on citizenship and residence by investment. Scott is a graduate of the University of British Columbia and attended the National University of Singapore. Scott joins us from Singapore today, and he's a member of Manila House and an old friend as well. We've done several events together at Manila House, and obviously because of circumstances, we're now doing it virtually. Scott?
Thank you very much, Bambina. Great to be here, and thank you very much for helping us organize this event. As Bambina mentioned, I'm the country head for Philippines for Henley Partners. Normally, I'd be traveling to the Philippines every month. Last year, I spent over 120 days there, and I've grown it to be one of our largest markets in Southeast Asia. Obviously, this year, I have not been so lucky to visit as often. It's been an interesting year for all of us. Business has grown at an unprecedented rate for us, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of political instability around the world. And of course, I'm not just talking about political instability in Southeast Asia. I'm sure we're all watching very closely what's going on right now with the US elections. And it wouldn't surprise you to hear that one of our largest growing markets is both Americans looking for a plan B that are living in the US, as well as Americans that are living in Asia or in the Philippines that don't anticipate they'll be ever living in the US anymore. And therefore they want to relieve themselves of the tax burden. We have a lot of local Filipino entrepreneurs that are using this downtime in the local sector to research opening businesses in new countries, particularly in Europe. And my discussions with these entrepreneurs are centered around not only a plan B for their families, but also hopefully emerging from the pandemic with new opportunities for their businesses. Today we'll be discussing residence by investment in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Portugal, and Spain. And I'll also touch briefly on citizenship by investment towards the end of the presentation. I'm thankful to have here on the call with me Mr. Tony Nevez. He's the country head for Australia for Henley Partners based in Melbourne. And also Marc Séguin, the co-founder and partner at Exeo law firm based in Montreal. We're very thankful Marc is here with us today. It's very early in the morning for him, so I hope he has a strong cup of Tim Hortons coffee next to him to help him wake up. We encourage you to participate throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we'll do our best to address these either throughout or towards the end of the presentation. Brief background on Henley Partners. We're a Swiss firm. We're the global leaders in investment migration. We're the only firm in this space to have true impact with our government advisory work. We've designed several residence and citizenship programs for governments around the world, and our advisory work has raised over $8 billion in foreign direct investment. We focus on residence and citizenship by investment. So we don't do retirement visas. We don't do student visas. We're very focused within the high net worth space. We're a global firm with 30 offices around the world. We have an office in locations where programs are important to our clients. We have an office in BGC in Manila. However, a lot of our clients prefer to have their information processed at a secure offshore location. So I have a big team here in Singapore that helps most of my Filipino clients. Just a snapshot of our government advisory work. As you can see, we've done work in Switzerland, Canada, the United Kingdom, as well as some of the smaller Caribbean countries. Malta is of interest here. This is really the flagship of all citizenship by investment programs. Henley Partners, we are the concessionaire, and this program that we designed has brought in over 2 billion euro foreign direct investment to the smallest economy and smallest country in the European Union. Now, what we see with this pandemic is that governments are desperate for external liquidity, and raising money through sovereign equity is a very good way to contribute to a economy's social programs and infrastructure projects. So we can anticipate that in the future, there's going to be more and more citizenship and residence programs becoming available, as obviously it's far more attractive than going to traditional debt markets. Just some high-level statistics for you. You can see in terms of high net worth individuals moving, it's not a surprise that a lot have been leaving China. I think a lot of these folks may be in some of the pogos in Manila. And in terms of inflow, Australia has a very high amount of high net worth individuals relocating there, mostly from Asia. Tony will get into more details about this further on into the presentation. And we can also look towards Canada. So Canada, actually proportional to the population, that's a huge amount of high net worth individuals immigrating to Canada. And this brings me quite close to home. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and actually growing up, I would notice a new Filipino friend show up in my class every year or two. And what was interesting is only half of them would stay. Looking back, I think dad got bored of Canada and wanted to go back and run his business, and mom was smart. Mom would not let him go back to the Philippines alone. Now, a lot of these families would have come through the federal Canadian investor scheme, and this actually no longer exists. Of course, this is common with programs in our industry as they're subject to changes in public perception and changes in government administration. Now, I'm certain, looking back at a lot of these families that left, they wish they would have stayed for the extra 1 to 2 years required to naturalize to obtain Canadian citizenship, because now, of course, it's much, much more difficult. As wealth grows in the developing world, demand to immigrate to first world countries has increased and the goalposts have narrowed, making it a lot more difficult. I always advise my clients that if they are interested in a program that is on offer, they should act, because these are not permanent and they definitely change over time. Just before we go into the details on Australia and Canada, it's important to distinguish the difference between residence and citizenship. Citizenship is a permanent state. You're protected under the Constitution of the country. You have full voting rights, and it affords protection from the state. Residence allows you to stay in a certain country, although it is not necessarily permanent, and it can be subject to changes in government ruling or government administrations. This is just a snapshot of the most popular programs in the Philippines. Looking at these, there's some that are residence programs and some that are citizenship programs. To give you an idea of my client base in the Philippines, I've been traveling frequently there for the past 6 years. And actually, most of my clients do not leave the Philippines. They're successful entrepreneurs that have growing businesses that they need to be on the ground managing. So they're looking to invest to get a plan B, another option for their families, perhaps open doors for their children, or open new ways to do business without having to spend a significant amount of time. So we're going to start this presentation with programs where you would need to relocate. And towards the end, we're going to discuss options where you can actually stay in the Philippines. You can continue to run your business, but invest to obtain another option for your families. So for these initial options, also keep in mind that a lot of our clients will choose these options for family members that maybe aren't at the head of the business. So there's several ways that we can look at these opportunities. Now, without further ado, I'll invite my colleague in Melbourne, Mr. Tony Nevez, to discuss residence by investment in Australia.
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the presentation. As Scott mentioned, my name is Tony Nevez. I'm the manager of Henley Partners in Australia. I'm based in Melbourne. The presentation tonight, I'm going to keep it fairly brief, but I'm just going to run through the key residence by investment programs that Australia currently has available. Now, Scott showed you a slide a little minute ago about the global movement of high net worth individuals, and you would have seen that for the last 3 years, Australia has been the #1 destination around the world. And this slide just gives you some of the reasons why people choose Australia. So, you know, we have quite a small population for a large country, little over 25 million people. The lifestyle here is obviously a very attractive reason that people move. Our education system and our healthcare system are first rate, and our healthcare system has been in sharp focus this year with the global pandemic. In fact, I'm here in Melbourne, where we did have a second wave of the pandemic. Back in August, we had one day where there were over 700 new cases. On that same day, there were about the same number of new cases in the UK and France. And, you know, 7 weeks later, Melbourne now has 0 new cases. And those countries in Europe are looking at 25 to 30,000 new cases a day. So a lot of that is down to the very strict lockdown we had here, but also our very, very good healthcare system. Obviously, the climate attracts a lot of people to Australia. It's a big country. We have everything from, you know, ski fields to tropical beaches and everything else you can think of. And then the last point there, we talk about livable cities. So generally in the Mercer Index and the Economist Index each year, when they rank the world's most livable cities, Australia regularly has, you know, 2 or 3 cities in the top 10, along with Canada and a couple of places in Europe. So there's some of the reasons people might choose Australia. If we go to the next slide, I'll just now talk about the programs that are available. Essentially, there are 2 programs, and the first one I want to talk about is called the Business Innovation and Investment Program. It's the 188 visas is the visa number. So this is a provisional visa program, and what that means is that it's a 2-stage process. So you apply for one of these visas, you go through an assessment process. If you're successful in that assessment process, you get a provisional visa that allows you to come to Australia and stay in Australia for 4 years on a provisional visa. And at the end of that 4 years, you need to meet certain business or investor requirements in order to get permanent residence. So there are 3 streams to this program. The first stream is called the Business Innovation Stream, the 188A visa. So this is a business visa. It's not an investment visa. It's for people who already have a successful business in the Philippines, and they may want to come to Australia and set up a business or buy a business or buy part of a business and become involved as the owner of that business. So there are certain threshold requirements you need to meet. If you are successful, you're granted the visa, you come to Australia, you need then to invest in a business and become involved in running it. And because you have to run it, this visa requires you to spend a significant amount of time in Australia. What it is, it's 12 months in the last 2 years of the provisional visa. And that's because the government allows you a bit of time to find a business that you want to invest into or start your business. And then you need to be established here, be running your business and show that it's profitable and that you're employing some Australians and so on. So that's the business innovation stream. The next visa in this program is called the investor stream visa. So this is the 188B. It's for successful investors or business people. You can be a business person and apply for this. This visa requires you to put 1.5 million Australian dollars into government bonds for 4 years. At the end of the 4-year period, you will get that money back. Government bonds here pay almost no interest at the moment. In fact, our Reserve Bank cut our interest rate yesterday to 0.1%. So it's quite low, but it is safe. It's a government bond. You will get that back at the end of 4 years, and you will get permanent residence provided you have spent 2 of those 4 years physically in Australia. So that's the investor stream visa. The third visa in this program, the one I'll talk a little bit more about, is called the significant investor visa. Now this visa is has a lot more flexibility to it than the other visas, but you do need to invest 5 million Australian dollars into a managed investment fund for 4 years. And if we just jump to the next slide, we've got a bit more about the significant investor visa. It's the 188C visa. And if anyone's interested, the other number there, 888, that's the permanent visa. So as I said at the beginning, it's a provisional visa for 4 years, and then it's a permanent visa after that. So how do you get this visa? First of all, you must have 5 million Australian dollars, which is about $3.5 million US dollars at the moment. You must invest that into a managed fund in Australia. You have to prove the source of those funds, and you have to be able to show that you can transfer those funds to Australia. Now, the benefit of this visa is, first of all, there is no maximum age limit. There is an age limit on the other visas of 55 years. There's no points test with this visa. Points test applies to the other visas, looks at your age, assets, your background, and so on. This visa requires no business or investment experience, and the residence requirement over the 4-year period is just 160 days. So that's 40 days a year if you spread it out, or you can do that in one block if you choose to. This visa can also be extended twice. You can extend it for 2 years, and you can do that twice. So you could, in effect, stay in Australia on a provisional visa for up to 8 years. Now, why would somebody want to do that? And that might be to do with taxation. So you may want to be on a path to achieve Australian permanent residence, but you may not want to become an Australian tax resident immediately. And this is the visa that you would use to do that. Because it has that low residence requirement, you can avoid becoming an Australian tax resident, but you can be on a pathway to permanent residence. A couple of other points with this, that 160 days only applies to the primary applicant. And so we do have many families where potentially there are children that you want to put into school in Australia, either high school or into university. And so one parent will come to Australia with the children. That parent is the primary applicant. That can be either the husband or the wife. And the other parent can remain back in the Philippines doing business, doing whatever you need to do. And so it's only the 60 days. And yet all members of the application, all members of the family will get permanent residence at the end of 4 years. Sorry, Scott, I just saw something pop up there about my internet connection. I hope this is moving along smoothly. I'll just keep going. If I can have the next slide. The other program I wanted to talk about this evening fairly briefly is called the Business Talent Program, the 132 program. Now, the difference with this visa is that it is not a provisional visa. It goes directly to permanent residence. So if you qualify for this visa, you could get permanent residence in around about 12 months. That's how long the processing is for this visa. So if we look at the next slide that has requirements for the 132 program, as an age cutoff of 55, unless you're prepared to make a bigger investment into business in Australia. You need to be a successful business person in your home country, which means you need to own 30% at least of the business, of your current business. The government here measures how successful you have been in your business. They want to see that you have business and personal assets of at least 1.5 million Australian dollars and at least 400,000 Australian dollars must be business assets. You must be able to show that your business, and we're still talking about your current business in the Philippines, can show annual turnover of at least 3 million Australian dollars for 2 of the last 4 years. So that's turnover, not profit. And you must be prepared to make a significant investment into business in Australia within 2 years of getting the visa and become involved in the day-to-day management of your business, your new business. So that's the requirements to get the visa. Now there are, to keep the visa, you need to show that you're involved in your business in Australia. But we do some programs here with people who are interested in property. I think the next slide talks about how we can help you get this particular visa through an investment into property. Now, most Australian visas, you can't simply buy an apartment or a house or commercial property and get residence. But with this visa, you can do it through property development. Now, I'll just run through that again. What you need to do is you need to have a successful business in your home country with turnover of at least 3 million. You need to own at least 30% of that. You need to be prepared to invest at least $2.5 million into property development in Western Australia. Western Australia at the moment is one state that is doing this. We can also do this in Queensland now, in Brisbane, and also in Adelaide in South Australia. The investment amounts are slightly different. In Western Australia, if you're over 55, the government will ask you to invest a larger amount, 3.75 million. But if you're prepared to do that, you can get permanent residence in Australia in as little as 12 months. So let me just quickly run through how that works on the next slide. So you agree to do this through property development. We make an introduction to one of our partners in Western Australia. You agree to invest 2.5 million. Our partner then in Perth will assist you to set up the property development company, purchase the land for the development, all aspects of the design and building and development process. The requirement in Western Australia is that you develop 3 residential properties over a 2-year period. Importantly, you retain 100% ownership of your property development company. And at the end of that 2-year period, you simply sell those properties into the market. And the Western Australian real estate market is, in fact, growing quite substantially at the moment. So what we would do is help you over that 2-year period. We continue to assist you to make sure that you're meeting all of the requirements of the visa. So you can see with this, you make your investment, your company builds those properties. That's managed for you by our property development partner in WA. At the end of the process, you sell those properties to recoup your investment plus some profit, hopefully, and you get permanent residence. So that's the 132 program. I don't have any other programs to talk about. I'll quickly mention taxation. So Australia does have progressive tax rates. There is a capital gains tax, but importantly in Australia, no wealth tax, no inheritance tax, And at least with that significant investor visa, I explained to you how you could become a resident, at least a provisional resident, without becoming a tax resident. New Zealand visas, I wasn't going to talk too much about those. I'll just quickly run through this. New Zealand is also a terrific country. They do have some fantastic programs. Two of them are listed there. These are the two investor programs. There's the Investor Plus program, 10 million New Zealand dollars for 3 years. It has no age limit, no English requirement. You don't need any business experience, but you do need to spend 44 days in New Zealand in each of the last 2 years of that visa. There is a slightly cheaper program, the Investor 2 resident program, that requires a 3 million New Zealand dollar investment for 4 years. But this one has an age cutoff of 65 years. It does have an English test, and there is also a points test that assesses your assets and your business background, investor background, and so on. This one has a larger residence requirement. You must spend 146 days in New Zealand in each of the last 3 years of the 4-year visa. So they're the New Zealand investor programs. We do have New Zealand registered agents within Henley Partners who can assist you with this if you're interested in those programs. Just before I finish, one thing I might just mention, the Australian government, going back to the Australian programs, the Australian government has announced that they are reviewing all of the Australian programs and that there will be changes to those programs in July of 2021. The government hasn't announced exactly what those changes will be, but we can expect potentially that the investment amounts might increase. The $5 million visa may go to $7 million. The 1.5 million investment might go to 3 million, and there may be changes with the other programs as well. So I would simply say that if you're interested in the Australian programs and you think you would like to explore your eligibility, now is the time to do it, because they may change in 2021. Okay, that's it for my presentation. I hope I didn't run over time too much. I will certainly hang around in case any of you have questions that you want to ask, and we can have a look at those. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's definitely interesting to see that there's options for real estate in both Australia and New Zealand. It's also worth mentioning that if you're a PR in Australia, you can live in New Zealand, but not the other way around. So pursuing one of the programs in Australia could provide a few more options for families. And again, Tony is there to help. Tony has 35 years of experience in the investment migration, or in the migration space rather. Prior to Henley Partners, Tony was with the Australian Immigration Department in Canberra, Bangkok, Athens, and Vienna. He's a registered Australian migration agent and holds a graduate certificate in migration law from the University of Victoria. Now we're going to move on to the Canadian part of the presentation, and I'm thankful to have Mr. Marc-André Séguin here with us. Marc has been practicing law in the immigrant investor industry since 2010 and has published a widely read handbook on the Quebec Immigrant Investor Program. Marc is an attorney licensed in both Canada and the United States. He graduated from McGill University Law School and holds a degree in both civil and common law. He also holds a master's in Asian legal studies from the National University of Singapore. Now, it is very early in the morning for Marc right now, so he's not going to share his screen, but I can assure you that he has a very strong cup of Tim Hortons coffee next to him, getting him ready for the presentation. Thank you very much for joining us, Marc.
Thank you, Scott. And actually, it's more than a cup, it's the full French press. Thanks, everyone, for attending today. And it's a pleasure to be seeing you, although you are not seeing me, because it is 4:30 in the morning here, so you're not missing much. My portion of this presentation is going to focus strictly on Canada. We are a law firm, so by law I'm required to add this disclaimer. None of the material that is shared today creates a lawyer-client relationship. So, and also before you consider taking any steps in furtherance of these the opportunities that these programs present, just make sure to talk to us first as well. Canadian law is very complex. There are a lot of nuances, and there are roughly 80 business immigration programs in the country. Obviously, we can't run through all of those, but in order to make sure that your process goes as smoothly as possible, it is important to talk to a licensed professional about these matters. I wanted to briefly introduce you to our team. We have a lovely office in Old Montreal in Quebec, Canada. We have people from a wide variety of origins working at the office, who are lawyers in several jurisdictions, including on both sides of the Canada-US border. You are more than welcome to come and visit us. Our firm has had quite a bit of success, if I may say, and that success has also had repercussions. We've been featured in a number, our team has been featured in a number of mainstream media. If you have any questions about those, feel free to let me know. I'll be more than happy to share those with you. But if you have any questions about our credentials, just feel free to Google me. More than happy to share some of those with you all as well. Moving on to Canada specifically. As I mentioned, from a business immigration standpoint, there are roughly 80 business immigration programs in Canada, and that's just counting business immigration. For most people, and we will be focusing more on investor immigration in this presentation, but just to give you a rough presentation of how the Canadian immigration system works, there are a number of reasons why people might want to go to Canada. And setting aside the humanitarian immigration matters, we could divide those into three main categories. So you have people who are going to Canada as visitors, so what we would call business visitors or tourists. Typically, the process for that is significantly easier. All you need is an electronic travel authorization, in some cases a visa, and you'll be good to go. But you'll also be only able to go to Canada for a limited amount of time, and the amount of things that you are allowed to do on Canadian soil will also be strictly limited. Then you also have people who want to go to Canada on a temporary status, but for an extended stay, and again, for a very specific amount of time. That would be the case for people who are applying for instance, a work permit. We could also put study permits in that category as well. So it's a more extended stay, but still very focused. In some cases, however, it's a very good option for people who are interested in going to Canada faster, and in some cases even use that as a bridge status leading into a more permanent one, which is our third category, permanent residency. So that permanent residency is precisely what it is. It is a status that allows you to live, work, study, do business in Canada under a status that, if you spend enough time on Canadian soil, can also allow you to apply ultimately for citizenship. So that's really the third and last category that will lead to Canadian citizenship if you decide to go for it. But we will narrow this down on our webinar today, and we will focus on immigration for investors. In Canada, if we take a step back very quickly, there are essentially three types of investor immigration programs that are currently active today. You have a more passive investment route, which is similar to what we'll discuss under the Quebec Immigrant Investor Program, where you are essentially demonstrating where you're essentially demonstrating that you have a minimum amount of net assets, that you have a lawful source of funds, and provided that you also have the requisite management experience, you'll be invited to make a passive investment leading to Canadian permanent residency. Then you also have in our second category, which is what you would find for most of the provinces in Canada, you would have a points-based immigration program. The example we will use in this case will be the British Columbia Provincial Nominee Program, but the structure will be very similar in Ontario, in New Brunswick, and so forth. So that's the second option, in which case what you are required to do is present a business idea and also an idea of your profile, and based on your profile and your business idea and how the Canadian authorities feel you will be equipped to lead this project into a successful business venture, you will be awarded points. The more points you get, the higher you will score, and the higher your likelihood of being invited by the immigration authorities of that province to apply for permanent residency. The third category is what I like to call the Shark Tank of Canadian immigration, which is essentially for people who have a innovative business idea that is likely to be successful in Canada. If you make your pitch and you're successful, you'll be invited to apply as well. So moving on to the specifics of these categories. The Quebec Immigrant Investor Program, which is essentially in the same spirit as the former federal immigrant investor program that used to exist at the federal level, but which was unfortunately shut down back in 2014. Quebec did decide as a province to keep its structure for the investor program, and therefore it is still the last remaining passive investment option leading to Canadian permanent residence that is available today. We have recently heard that because the program is currently, the program's intake is currently suspended, but we have recently heard that the authorities will be reopening this program on April 1st of 2021, which means that if you are interested in looking into this program, now will be the right time to start thinking about that, because it is also a program that is in high demand and that has an annual quota of files that can be applied in any given intake period. So the spots are going to be quite competitive. Rough breakdown of the program. In order to qualify as an immigrant investor in Quebec, you need to demonstrate that you have at least $2 million of net assets as part of your personal wealth, or including that of your spouse. You also need to prove that you have 2 years of management experience over the last 5 years. And you need to show the lawful origin of your funds. If you meet those requirements, you will be required to make a passive investment, which in this case is a payment of 380,000 Canadian dollars that would then be used to finance a much bigger investment of 1.2 million Canadian dollars to complete your application. So the 380,000 is really a payment. It is not money that you are getting back after a period of time. It is used on your behalf by your authorized financial institution into the program to fund essentially the purchase of a financial product in your name. But apart from that, there's no obligation to create, run, or manage a business or to create jobs. It is entirely run by government entities and by heavily regulated financial institutions. So you also know that the operation itself lends itself to a significant amount of transparency and accountability. And it is a direct path to permanent residency. The program is done in 2 steps. First with the province, where you get qualified as an immigrant investor, and then for permanent residency at the federal level. Moving on to the next Exeo, the next program, which actually, to Scott's point, and I did want to keep that in as an example of how quickly things move. This program was available a few weeks ago, and last Wednesday, we learned that the Quebec Entrepreneur program, which is an alternative for people who want to actively run a business in Quebec, that program has now been suspended and will remain suspended for the next 12 months. So people who were contemplating doing something like this no longer have that option. Which, to Scott's point earlier on this call, is that if there is a program among the options that we discuss or that we can explore with you at an individual level later on, do make sure that you evaluate it. But if you sit on it too long, unfortunately, these programs do tend to change quite a bit and open and get closed a lot. So I would invite you to consider that when you're evaluating your options. However, this one is no longer one of them, unfortunately, at least for the foreseeable future. Moving on to the points-based system. You have here the British Columbia Entrepreneur Program, or what we call the Provincial Nominee Program. In this case, you'll see that in order to qualify, you would have to have managerial experience. There's a minimum net worth requirement. And you'll also notice that you are required to submit a business proposal to establish a new business or buy an existing one in British Columbia. You are required to invest a minimum of 200,000, and so in some cases it could be a large equity investment as well if you're looking at buying a smaller stake in ownership. And you'll also be required to create at least one full-time job in Canada. So this particular category of business immigration programs, you will find structures that are similar to these in British Columbia, in Ontario, and in New Brunswick. They do require that you go through, generally between 5 to 7 steps between the moment that you apply until the moment that you finally get your permanent residency. So there's a lot of compliance to consider. These programs are really intended for people who want to actively run and grow a business in Canada. If that's part of your plan and you're looking at actually doing that in the Canadian economy, then this might be a good option for you as well. Just be aware that there are a significant amount of steps to consider. And we can share those with you in more detail on an individual basis. Moving on then to the absolute last category, which is called the Canada Startup Visa, which I like to refer to as the Shark Tank of immigration. In this case, what you are required to do, this particular program is intended for people who have an innovative business project that is likely to be successful in Canada and bring a significant contribution to the Canadian economy. So people who are involved in tech or in green energy or business projects, anything that can come with a twist. So definitely not a grocery store unless you intend to revolutionize the workflows through technology in the grocery store business. This is really more intended for people, the Silicon Valley type businesses. If you have something that might be of interest, in this case, what you are doing as part of a first step is you will have to pitch your idea to approved venture capital firms or angel investor firms or incubators who are licensed by the federal government to operate in this program, provided that you have the required support from them. You will be able to apply and make your case with the Canadian immigration authorities. The beauty of this program is that apart from the costs related Obviously, to making that pitch and developing the business, there is no minimum investment requirement, so to speak. Obviously, the incubators would have their fees for to support you throughout the steps of the program and so forth, but there is no minimum investment requirement per se from an immigration standpoint. And the processing time is relatively fast. We're looking at permanent residency being issued within roughly 16 to 18 months on average, and that's based on the numbers today. So again, a very good option for people who want to be actively involved in a business and who have an innovative business idea. Common question that I just wanted to briefly touch upon as well. Who can you bring to Canada with you as part of an application? Any permanent residency application to Canada may include the main applicant's spouse, and any children who are under the age of 22 by the time that you apply. In some very rare cases, dependents who are age above 22 will be allowed to join as well, as long as they've depended on their parents for financial support since before they reach 22, and they can't financially support themselves because of a health condition, so be it mental or physical health condition. Apart from that, so if you have 1, 5, 6 children who are under the age of 22, that will not matter. You will be able to include them as part of the same application. The only difference you will see is a slight increase in application fees at the federal level for the visa processing. And I will keep it at that. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a line in the chat group. I'll be happy to answer. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's good to see that both Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are open for investors to enter. Obviously, as you can see, these are all countries where yourself or members of your family would need to plan ahead to relocate outside of the Philippines. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, a lot of my clients are looking for options where they can stay in the Philippines to run their business and be with their extended family. And we're going to go into options in Portugal and Spain right now, as well as we'll touch a little bit on citizenship by investment towards the end of this presentation. Portugal is the most popular program in the Philippines because it provides a straightforward and doable route towards naturalization, towards citizenship. If you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I made a distinction between citizenship and residence. We always advise our clients to aim for citizenship because it is a permanent state for the family. And for residence programs, once children are finished their school, they will no longer be considered dependent on their parents. So if they have not naturalized and obtained citizenship, they will lose their dependency. And this, of course, is true for both Portugal and for Spain. For Portugal, it seems the government next year will also change the qualifying criteria. Most of my clients are buying in prime central Lisbon. It's easy to rent the property out. It's easy to liquidate once you receive the citizenship. But because property prices have recovered in these prime areas, they will most likely no longer qualify for the visa in 2021. So right now we have a rush of applicants that are getting in at the last minute just so they can complete their real estate transaction to qualify for the Portuguese golden visa. As you can see here, the minimum investment in Portugal is quite a bit less than Spain. That's equivalent to about 16 million peso. So you by no means have to be a very wealthy individual to afford a second option for yourself and your family. In terms of the required amount of time that one needs to spend, in Portugal, you need to spend effectively 7 days per year in the country. In Spain, there are no residence requirements if you don't want to naturalize and get the passport. However, it's a much different story if your aim is to get citizenship. Naturalization in Spain requires the entire family to relocate and spend more than half the year in the country for between 3 to 5 years total. You can never be outside the country for more than 3 months at any single time. Actually, Filipinos, because of being a former colony, you do qualify for a reduced amount of time required as residents to spend to be able to apply for citizenship. So this is 2 years of residence. However, what most agents will not tell clients is that you must maintain your residence until you get the passport. So you must be a resident for 2 years and then wait another 1 to 3 years to get the passport. So again, that's spending more than half the year for between 3 to 5 years, and this triggers global tax. As I mentioned, most of my clients look for options where they can stay in the Philippines and run their businesses. This is why Portugal stands alone and is so attractive. In Portugal, you only need to spend effectively 7 days per year for 5 years. Because you're not spending more than half the year in the country, this does not trigger any tax. And of course, this is essentially just a forced vacation for the family to visit Portugal and move towards citizenship. There is a language exam involved in both. In Portugal, it's quite a bit more simple at just A2 level. I have a question here. Please discuss how long the process is for Portugal from beginning to end for residency. That's an excellent question. So because of the pandemic, people have not been able to travel to Portugal. There is one visit required in order to be approved for the visa. So if we start right now, I would say that the waiting time would be about 1 year before you can get your visa. Of course, we can take the first steps right now to make the property purchase to ensure you still qualify under the 2020 legislation. But unfortunately, if we are to do that, we would need to start really this week because time is quickly running out. Once you get the residence, you need to spend effectively 7 days per year for 5 years. At the 5-year mark, as long as you've passed a basic level language exam and a Life in Portugal test, you can apply for citizenship. If your children are under the age of 18, they do not need to take the language exam, and everybody will qualify for the citizenship as long as the parents pass the exam. So that's the reason that this program is so popular in the Philippines. Now, moving on to citizenship by investment. This is a snapshot of the Henley Passport Index. It ranks citizenships on the amount of countries you can enter without applying for a visa. As you can see at the top of the list on the right side, these are countries where you can invest to obtain citizenship. And on the left side, you can see the countries that are our markets in Greater Asia. Philippines ranks number 76. So with a Philippines passport, you can enter 67 countries without applying for a visa. And as you can see through investment, you can bypass naturalization, and you can double to triple your visa-free access to the world. Now, the misconception here is that someone is buying a passport. This is certainly not the case. You need to rely on a firm to be able to properly represent you to the government, to justify your source of wealth, and to illustrate that you're an outstanding individual to the country of choice. And only then will they consider you for citizenship with the economic contribution. I'll start by touching on the Caribbean citizenship options. These are micronations south of Miami, north of Venezuela. Donation starts as low as 100,000 US for a family of up to 4 people. So again, by no means do you need to be a very wealthy individual to afford a second passport and a plan B for your family. There's different options here with investment. You can do a donation, or you can do a real estate investment. And our advice will always be different based on the amount of dependents that you have, the age of your children, and of course, what choice you're looking to make in terms of investment. In terms of visa-free access, all of these passports will give you access to the Schengen, access to the UK, and some of them will give you access to China, some will give you access to Taiwan. So for business people that need to travel and it's inconvenient to apply for visas, this is a very affordable way to better increase your visa-free access to the world. There's also some offers on because of the fall in tourism due to COVID. These countries rely heavily on tourism, so some of them have offered some temporary discounts to entice investors to obtain their citizenships. In St. Lucia, there is a temporary bond option. You can invest in either a 5 or a 7-year zero interest bearing bond that is guaranteed by the St. Lucian government for either 250 or 300,000 US respectively. Now moving on to some of the European citizenship options. And for those of you that are visual, this is an idea of the countries where a Philippine passport allows you to travel, highlighted in dark blue. Now, if you were to invest in the Malta Citizenship by Investment program, you can see how your visa-free access grows quite a bit. Looking at the options available in Europe, there's currently 3. Last month, we would be talking about the Cyprus citizenship program, but again, similar to what happened earlier in the presentation with Mark, the Cyprus citizenship by investment program has come to an end at the end of October, which leaves us with very few European options that are straight to citizenship. Austria is definitely on the higher end of investment. Malta is a program that Henley Partners designed and implemented back in 2013. The previous rendition of the program is actually full. We're expecting them to relaunch the second design within the next few months. Malta is considered mostly a wealth tax, so it's a contribution to the government. And what's convenient about Malta is that, of course, if we can justify to the government that you're an outstanding individual with clean source of funds, then you won't have to spend a significant amount of time in the country like you would in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, or Spain. Instead, you can obtain the citizenship in a much shorter amount of time. And lastly, Montenegro is a new citizenship program that was introduced towards the end of last year. What's interesting here is the price point. Because Montenegro is not yet part of the European Union, the citizenship is quite a bit more affordable than the investment in Malta. Montenegro will be the next country to be absorbed into the European Union. They first applied in 2008, and they've been harmonizing their economy and judicial system to European standard ever since. Experts independent to our industry anticipate that the country should be absorbed into the European Union starting around 2025. So this program becomes quite appealing and actually quite a good comparison to the Portugal residence program. So that's going to bring us to the end of our program. Again, we're an advisory firm. As you can see, these programs are quite complicated, and I know that every family in the Philippines is different. I'm often asked, what is the best program for Filipinos? And there's no correct answer to that question. It's always on a case-by-case basis, and it always depends on your family, the amount of dependents you have, and what your end goal is. I'm very happy to connect you with Mark if you have any questions. Of course, Tony is available as well for Australia and New Zealand inquiries. And if you have any other questions based on these programs that you see on the screen, I'd be very happy to take any of your questions. My contact details are on the screen, and I'll also type my email into the chat box. Thank you very much, everyone.
I think we're done for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you next week. We have a talk with JP Morgan about, well, whatever happens in the US elections and what that means for the economy and for the world and Southeast Asia, really. So, and then after that, we have a talk about Manila's heritage on November 17, and November 25, we have a talk about women leaders who have responded very well to the COVID crisis in their countries. And why that's so. This is in partnership with Asia Society. So thank you once again for joining us. We hope to see you at the club soon. You know, we're open. And if not, we hope you join us online and on Zoom with our webinars. So thank you again to Henley Partners for presenting this today. I think it's a very topical subject for everybody at the moment. We all want a plan B. We want, you know, to be able to get away for either medical reasons or investment reasons or citizenship reasons if the need arises. So thank you so much for bringing light into the situation, to this issue.